Hey everyone, welcome back to Talk Tech with Tiff. Today I sat down with Dani, who is a software developer. However, her story didn't begin there. She initially was a writer and then transitioned from going to a bootcamp into a startup and now at a big company as a software developer. This story was so inspiring, hearing her journey, obstacles she faced, and really how she overcame them. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to click on the link down below to sign up for my monthly newsletter where I share unique discount codes, personal stories, and also a lot of career and tech advice. Okay, let's get started. Welcome to my new series called Talk Tech with Tiff, where I am sitting down with industry professionals to hear about their career journeys and current roles. I created this series to hear from people who are established in the tech industry so that we can all learn what these individuals do in their day-to-day jobs and the type of opportunities that are out there. Okay, let's get started. Hi, Dani. How's it going?
Hey, Tiffany. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to see you. For those of people who don't know, we've worked together for quite some time, so it's nice to have someone I've worked with in the past on the podcast.
Yes. Yeah, this is really cool. I've only done one other podcast before, and it was over the phone. So this is a whole new experience for
all
me.
In person. I know you come in and there's like all this equipment and stuff. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's cool though. This is awesome.
And I'm really excited to talk to you because you have such an interesting and inspiring story, really transitioning from writing into tech, into software development. But before we get into it, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a software developer. I work at IBM, and I'm also a beekeeper and a gardener. I do rock climbing, all kinds of things. So that's in a nutshell.
I love it. I know you led some really amazing initiatives at IBM that you brought me onto with gardening and planting, and it's such a whole different world, like the garden and the beekeeping and all that. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I kind of just stumbled into that. So it's good. And I kind of have brought my sustainability stuff into IBM as well. So
yes. And before we get into that, though, tell me a little bit about your transition, really, from what you used to be doing with writing and then how it evolved into where you are today. Because I know we went to the same boot camp, different time, but same boot camp. And tell me a little bit about your story with that.
Yeah, so I was an English major in university. I went to the University of Guelph. And I wanted to be a music journalist. So big fan of Almost Famous. I wanted to do that. I interviewed bands in the city in Guelph, and I made my own blog just so I could post the interviews. And then after school, I wrote for the student newspaper in Guelph, in the arts section. And then when I graduated, I became a content writer at a local radio station in Toronto. And I did that for a few years and ended up getting laid off November 2017.
Okay.
And I kind of wanted to do something different. I wasn't quite doing music journalism. I was doing content writing, and it was just kind of a dead end for me. It wasn't very creative from what I was writing in my position. So I was trying to decide if I was going to go back to school. I didn't want to do a long-term commitment.
4-year degree kind of thing.
Yeah, no. And then I ended up running into a friend who graduated from Brain Station, which was the coding boot camp I went to, and she did the UI program. So I just I Googled what it was. I didn't know what a coding boot camp was. Yeah. I saw the UI program, and then I saw the web development program, and I kind of just went for the web development because I made that blog in university. I kind of dabbled in HTML and CSS on my own time.
Yeah.
So I always liked it. I just never considered it as something I could do for a living. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that was, I can get into it, but just being discouraged in school from doing technical subjects. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I enrolled kind of overnight decision. I did the full-time, full-stack web development program January 2018 to March, I want to say.
Yeah.
Went back as a teaching assistant, and then started working in the field and started doing software development, and now I'm at IBM. So
it's a continuous evolution. That's great. I think that's a question I get asked quite a bit, actually, is people who are considering going to a boot camp and they're they haven't been exposed to the industry like many of us who went to a boot camp prior, and they're uncertain, should I do the UI UX side of things? Should I do the web development side of things? So for you, you really chose web development because of your past, like in high school?
Yeah, exactly. It was just, I always liked, like I learned HTML and CSS like back in MySpace days. I always liked building web pages. I did really well in high school in the web design class. I just, again, I didn't consider it as a possibility because I was not good at math. I actually failed grade 11 math. I had to go to summer school. I had my guidance counselor in high school tell me to stay away from technical subjects and to do arts. So I really didn't think I had it in me. And in retrospect, I see that was because of influences that were negatively impacting me at the time. And so I kind of just, I was really good at English. I was really good at writing essays. I loved reading. Yeah. So I just stuck to that. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't undo my English degree. I loved majoring in English. Like that was great. But if I could, I would go back and take some computer science courses or something. Cause I just, again, didn't think I had it in me until I went to this boot camp later in life. It was just before I turned 25. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. I remember too, and I still get asked this a lot too, is I associated that you had to be so good at math and science and all this in order to get into coding, like that the two, for whatever reason, were side by side, which is not the case at all. And I think it still to this day dissuades a lot of people who hear that from even pursuing it, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, even just getting into that later in life and going to that boot camp, I learned a lot about myself in terms of how I learn. Yeah. So I figured out I was a visual learner. Would have been nice to know that like when I was actually in school. But I remember I had this TA, her name's Alice. So shout out to Alice. Yes. And so things got difficult because of my lack of technical background when I started learning JavaScript. That was very difficult for me. And a lot of that was because I wasn't trained to think in a problem solving way and in that kind of technical way. So I struggled a lot to pick up JavaScript. And I remember learning for loops and having a breakdown. Yes. Because I just didn't get it. And I think for me, what I learned from that experience was I need to understand why something is happening for me to understand it. And so Alice, my TA, she sat down with me and she console logged the iterator in a for loop and like basically showed me in the console what is happening, like what is going on in the background. And when I saw that, I was like, it just clicked. And yeah, in hindsight now, I'm thinking about like all the math teachers I had in school and how like they didn't take the time, you know.
Yeah.
And
one way fits all.
It's that's a bigger problem in itself, right? Like one person to like 30 kids in a classroom. That's a whole other thing. Like there's no way they could spare that time, right? No. But yeah, I had it in me. I just learned a little differently than other people. So figuring that out was really nice. And then once I saw that for loop and what was happening, a lot of things kind of fell into place.
Yeah, I know. It's one of the things I always say too is when you're going into a boot camp, especially like you and I did, where we had very little technical background or coding background, you're also learning how you learn and how to learn. You know, like it's a whole other skill set when you're learning those for the first time about JavaScript or for loops or anything like that, because you've never. It's a new way of thinking, really. And if you haven't been exposed to that, or when you're younger, or taking those kind of like coding classes when you're younger, it's just like you're learning how to code, but you're also learning how to learn in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think I really fell into that myth of being like right-brained. Right brain is the arts brain, right? Yeah, I was like right brain heavy, and I just don't think that that's real. I think everyone can use their full brain. Yeah. And yeah, when we put ourselves into boxes like that, then it limits what we're capable 100%.
Of. I posted on my stories this morning if people had questions for everyone I was sitting down with. And one of the questions that I got someone asked for me to ask you, was going from a writing background, which they said, creative writing background and getting to use that creativity. Do you find yourself still getting to be creative in software development and what you do today?
Oh, 100%. There's all kinds of correlations I found between my writing background and even just my English training and coding. Like picking up on syntax comes really naturally to me, and a lot of that is because of like writing essays and focusing on grammar and punctuation and having that eye for detail, which translated really well into learning new coding languages. And in terms of creativity, yeah, I think coding's really creative. You know, I can, I don't know how to say this. I hope you can fix this. Basically, like, there's a lot of room to put your own way of thinking into a code base and like kind of look at different patterns and writing functions, naming functions, naming variables. Like, there's so many different things that are creative. And also just like, you know, customizing your terminal or customizing your, everything. Right. And I think, I found a lot of creativity in coding.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's no one way to solve a problem. And then to decide how you're going to solve that problem is creative in itself.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the time, like, I do mostly front-end development. Right now I'm actually learning a back-end role, which is new for me, but I do mostly front-end. And a lot of the time you have to, like, as a developer, step into a user's experience, step into, like, empathize with the user and go through user stories. And I think that is creative in itself as well.
Yeah, I agree. You are very big in the sustainability world and green coding world. For those people who aren't as familiar with what green coding is, could you kind of break it down as to what is green coding?
Yeah, so green coding, it's a very new way of thinking, of approaching software. It really comes down to the carbon impact of the code that you're writing. And, you know, a lot of people are like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And it really is like, it's writing clean, reusable, scalable code that's gonna last, you know, long term. And if we think about the amount of data that we transfer in code, so for example, I use front end examples a lot because I think it's a lot easier for people to kind of conceptualize. But when you load a web page in your browser, for example, there's all kinds of different files that are coming to your browser to show what you're seeing on the screen, and those could be images, videos. Different styles of fonts, like maybe you're hitting some Google font endpoint, like URLs, and all those things are coming in and compiling and making that web page. But what we don't think about is the amount of energy it takes to transfer that data across the network. And it also depends on where the server is located, the web server, and where your browser is located. So that distance traveled, the longer distance, the more energy is going to be consumed, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the examples I've used is like optimizing your front end, optimizing your design, it's like simplified UI, like taking into account like how heavy images can be, how heavy videos can be. Does this really add value to your application, or can you remove it? Do you really need to use custom fonts, or can you use system fonts, for example, like fonts that are already available to you? All those decisions make a difference in terms of the amount of energy your website is consuming. And, you know, there's so many examples, but if you also think about optimizing data, optimizing your cloud, servers that are dead and not being used, are they still running? Are they still consuming power? Loops in your code that are running in the background. Endpoints that are being hit that don't need to be hit. Like, are you calling data in that is like you're not even using it anymore, but you're still hitting that endpoint and still making that call? That's all energy that's being consumed, right? So a lot of that is cleaning up your code, refactoring, and just making sure the code that you're writing and the software that you're building is basically using as little power as possible and has a small footprint.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I never had heard about, I think I've heard maybe the term, but until you really highlighted it for me, it's not even something, and I feel terrible saying this, but it's not even something I really thought about until you brought it to my attention. But once you are aware of it, you can't ignore it, you know? But I think it's in this stage where a lot of people who are building technology, developers and many other roles, aren't even aware of it at this point, which I think hopefully that will change soon.
Yeah, and it can be really overwhelming to think about, okay, well, where do I start? I'm working in this legacy code base already that exists, and what do I do? Like, it's too much work. Maybe you don't have enough staff, but even just thinking about the environment that your developers are working in, are you leaving your monitors on all night? Are you leaving your power bars on? Can you turn them off? Is there anything that you're consuming energy like in your workspace that doesn't need to be? Are you recycling? Yeah. Are you composting? Like everything, right? It's not even just the software that the devs are writing, but also the way the devs are working. It's just like keeping in mind basically the environment and everything that you do.
Yeah. And have you seen more businesses become curious about this or want to transition over when they are asking for products to be built?
Yeah. So I've noticed that there is a lot of software being built that has the goal of helping businesses reduce their carbon emissions by, measuring ESG data, for example. That stands for ESG is environmental, social, and governance data.
Okay.
So basically software that's being built that's telling a company where they can reduce their footprint. But my question is always, what about that software? So is that software you're running to help your company reduce its carbon footprint? Is that consuming energy in itself? Is that well written? Is this an application that's going to become obsolete in 5 years because your code isn't scalable?
Yeah.
Like thinking about the long term, and that's a problem with like our society has, is not considering the long term impact, right? So like, are you building an application that, is going to become obsolete in 5 years? Can you hand this off to a whole new dev team and have them take over easily because you've written good documentation? Like, those are the types of questions.
I know.
And I don't think that is being considered enough. And again, I think it's a very new way of thinking. There's something called the Green Software Foundation.
Okay.
And it's actually led by Asim Hussain, who works for Microsoft, and he is their Green Cloud lead at Microsoft. So he founded this foundation, and what they do is they do research around green software. They're trying to come up with open source. They're big on open source, so like products that businesses can use, integrate into their apps, and just kind of lead that way of thinking. So I've learned a lot from them.
That's really interesting. It's definitely at that point where it's companies are starting to recognize how important this is, and it's just going to hopefully continue more and more in that direction.
Yeah, I think it has to.
It has to. Yeah, it's not even an option.
Yeah. We really need to start considering our environmental impact in everything, not just software, but everything we do.
I know. And it's easy to do. When I say easy, I mean like it's simple things such as, like you said, turning off your monitor. Does your office have a place to recycle or to compost? Like, those are very easy things, simple things to implement, but for whatever reason aren't in many companies, or aren't a lot of them. It's interesting.
Yeah. So that would be my advice always, is just start from the basics. Like, start with getting a good sorting system for your garbage, and then go from there. Exactly.
One step before another. Kind of switching gears a little bit here. I feel like we have quite a bit in common with our journeys, just from when I always struggle with this term non-traditional, because I think now there is no one way to get into tech, or really traditional anymore way to get into tech or software development. But we both came from a boot camp, and then, now being in the industry, a lot of times, of course, you're working with people who went to school for computer science or software engineering. Did you ever, or do you ever, face imposter syndrome as far as, hey, I don't have that plaque, or I don't have that experience from the 4 years?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's gotten a lot better now at this point in my life. I've been at IBM. I actually just reached my 3-year mark in May.
Congrats.
And now I'm like, I deserve to be here. I put the work in, and no one's going to tell me otherwise. That's my attitude. But it took a while to get there. So much imposter syndrome, even just, there were so many moments, I think, for the first 2 years that I was in the industry, just every day being like, how am I doing this? Like, I'm a software developer now. Like, I'm an English major. This isn't right. Like, I'm building this feature in this banking app that people are going to be using.
So many people use.
Yeah. And a lot of that, I took, a lot of hits to my confidence, a lot of trying to work through that imposter syndrome. But I do think that everyone needs to realize, like, especially bootcamp grads, like, boot camps are hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to go from a boot camp to getting a job.
It is.
And the fact that you did that, you deserve to, like, you did the work and you deserve to be where you are. So that's my advice.
I totally agree. And for someone who's in that stage of, you mentioned those emotions you had, a while ago, what is some advice when they're like in the thick of it, like just feeling like they don't belong and why are they here and someone's going to find them out or anything like that? Like, what is some advice to kind of carry on?
Yeah. So I'll just go through things I did to get me through. And I also, like, on top of the imposter syndrome, I also have, like, mental health issues as well, like diagnosed depression and anxiety. And so I know a lot of software developers that go through the same thing. So I was also working through those barriers as well. Lots of voices in my head telling me I can't do it and I shouldn't be here. And I think ways that I got through it, I think the most important was connecting with other developers like you. Yeah. My friend Cynthia.
Yeah.
At IBM. Like just being honest, talking about it, talking to other developers. Also taking breaks, stepping away, realizing you are not code. That's not your life. Like you have other things, you know, that add value to your life. Kind of remembering the people that you're surrounded by, the hobbies that you have. And sometimes I would like do a fun project with a friend or go on like a website and do some JavaScript.
Yeah. Do something fun with
questions.
it again.
Yeah. Just do something
I
fun.
Love that.
Answer questions that you can do. Yeah. That boosts your confidence.
I love that. Yeah, it's so true for too long. And it's something I'm still working through. It's not easy, is not letting your code define your worth. And that's something I really, really struggled with. And I still do to some degree. I'm working through it. But if there's something I can't solve, or if there's something I'm like, oh, this code is shit or whatever, it affects my entire day, even after work hours. And that's not how it should be, but to actually get to that point where it doesn't is a whole other ball game.
And I've been in those positions so many times, still do every day. And my biggest piece of advice is just to walk away, like get up, get away from your desk, get away from your computer, shut it down.
I know. Exactly. Yeah. Shut it down. I find, I'm always late to the game when it comes to leaving the computer. I'm always like, oh, I should have done this so long ago. Like just walked away.
Yeah. And honestly, I still to this day get stuck on bugs, get stuck on problems. My code's not running, what's going on. And I could easily just sit there for 10 hours straight freaking out. Yeah. But I've noticed that if I just go do something else and I come back to it, it's almost like, usually it clicks, like something, it's like your brain just needs a break for a second to get those muscles healed and come back.
Come back to it. I totally agree. And on those moments where I'm still stuck, I always think, okay, being stuck on something for 10 hours or X amount of hours, this isn't moving the business or product forward. And I'm here to do that. So just ask someone,
Oh, yes. Yeah. Anyone, especially at a place like IBM, they'll always say, please just ask. Yeah. Because, if you're stuck on a problem, silently suffering for 2 days and you don't tell anybody, you've kind of wasted everyone's time. Yeah. And you can delay, the product coming out on time. Yeah. And it's just so much more efficient to just ask.
I know, because it's usually something so simple too that you're missing. You're like, oh yeah, that's it. Like a light bulb moment then.
Yeah, I've had moments, very humbling moments. This was not at IBM. It was one of the startups I worked at. But just having a senior developer who was in charge of me, and he had a computer science degree from U of T.
Oh, wow.
And both of us just completely stuck on the same problem. Yeah. And we were just like both Googling the exact same thing. And it was so great to see that. It was very equalizing. And I was very new to the industry as well. So it was great to see somebody, and he had a master's of computer science, right? Like it was just nice to see him type something into Google that I did I typed the exact same thing.
Exactly.
Like everyone get stuck. Tech moves so quickly. You can't know everything. It's impossible.
It is.
And if you try to, it's just going to,
consume you.
It's going to consume you.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's one of my favorite things too. I'm really happy you highlighted that story because it's such a good story. And it's so true that everyone is still learning and growing, and you're never going to not use Google or Stack Overflow and if you aren't using any of those tools, you're probably not building to something that's challenging enough for you. You know, like you should always be learning and growing and using those. So it's interesting to me. I get asked a lot of questions of, how do you memorize all the code? Or did you memorize? And I'm like, Google. All I know is Google. Like I just got better at Googling.
You have to know Google.
Yeah.
And it's not a shameful thing. Everybody does it.
Exactly.
Speaking of Stack Overflow, actually the client I'm working with right now, we're using Microsoft Teams and their senior dev lead created a channel called Stack Overflow for us, which I thought was really cool.
I love that. And you just share links of like different Stack Overflow?
To ask questions. He was like, this is your, for the devs to ask questions, and called it Stack Overflow. And share links. But it was nice to just be like, we're all on the same page.
Yeah,
we all do the same things.
Exactly. Bring it all back down to the same level. I feel like I could sit here and talk with you about this for hours. But to wrap it up, what is some advice you would give to your younger self?
Ooh, so much advice. It's hard to narrow down, but I think if, just to keep with what we're talking about, the theme here is, I would definitely tell her to take some computer science courses. Don't listen to the guidance counselors in high school. I'm not going to be apologetic about that. Just don't. Like, if they're telling you something that has to do with you not being capable, just ignore them, because it's just, I just learned this, but our frontal lobes are developing until you're 25. So what you know in high school is not what you're going to know 4 years later. Just if you're interested in something, just do it. Like, you can do it.
I love that.
I would definitely tell her to ignore that advice about not taking technical subjects and just do it.
That's amazing advice. I totally agree. Danny, thank you so much for taking time to sit down and chat with me today.
Aw, thanks for having me, Tiffany. This was so fun.
It was fun. And I just always feel so inspired hearing your story and connecting with you.
Aw, you too, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Yay.